Hello and welcome to this Dot Connector videocast for subscribers to davidicke.com. Well, it's been another horrific week with the unspeakable bombing in Manchester. And something else that has been unspeakable, which always follows these horrors, and that is the stunning level of official hypocrisy that spews from the mouths of those in government and in the security agencies. We are being told that terrorism must not destroy our values. Well, I'll come to those Western values shortly. We're being told that we must come together and support the fact that our way of life must not be destroyed. And at the same time, those words are being spoken by authority. The Prime Minister, Theresa May, is deploying thousands of troops on the streets of Britain. Our way of life will not be destroyed. It's being destroyed by the response to every single attack all over the world. Thousands of troops now, almost permanently on the streets of France, with a state of emergency that just keeps being renewed and renewed and renewed, ongoing. And let no one kid themselves that another excuse exploiting the horrors of Manchester, another excuse that we need to be protected, will be Orwellian laws governing what can and cannot be said on the internet. Because it will be sold as we've got to stop terrorists communicating and radicalizing people. But it will be used to stop legitimate questioning of government and the official version of everything. If we are being told, well, they say our way of life mustn't change, that we must have basic freedoms deleted and more imposition by the state to protect us from terrorism, then we really ought to be looking in rather more depth at what this terrorism is and what's really behind it. And today I'm going to go through a few things that you will not have seen in the mainstream media, but should have seen if journalism was in any way part of what they do. For years now, best part of 30 coming up, I've been exposing an agenda to centralize power in the world more and more and more until there is a world government, until there's a world army, a world central bank dictating all global finance to everybody, and a world currency, which I said would be cash, no cash rather, just an electronic currency. We're heading so fast to the cashless society. All these things that I've been warning about and saying there was an agenda to introduce are happening. Day after day, we go down that road deeper and deeper. And I've talked in these nearly 3 decades, in books like this one, The Perception Deception. The Perception Deception says it all. I've talked in those books about how this centralized global Orwellian dictatorship was planned to be introduced. And it was through a series of mass mind and emotional manipulation techniques, the prime of which I call problem, reaction, solution. You create a problem covertly, you blame someone else for it. You then get the reaction from the people to the problem of fear, of outrage, of something must be done. And then you, who have covertly created the problem and got that reaction, then openly produce the solutions to the problems you and the networks that control you have covertly created. And I've been pointing out year after year after year, therefore, that the key currency of control, the foundation of how this perception deception is being played out on the human mind, is fear. Once you get someone in fear, they will invariably give their power away to that which they think will protect them from what they fear. Now, after this terrible bombing, almost unimaginable what people have been through, this is what one writer said this week in terms of what she was observing around her. A lot of people have told me they feel tired today, exhausted, and they don't know why. It is this everyday fear that tramples roughshod over all our lives all the time now. This heightened consciousness of danger, it's fatiguing, leaves you with a jaw of concrete, aching teeth, neck muscles taut, and subconsciously clenched against it all. And this is precisely the state of being that I've been warning all these years, that which is manipulating the world to this global Orwellian state has sought to put humanity in. And the more attacks and the more things there are to fear, the more this ongoing state of anxiety and fear is installed in the target population. And this is why these attacks are in places where people would think they were safe. This is why they're in schools in America. This is why they're in shopping malls. This is why they're in concert venues. Places where people, in their sense of normality, would not go in a state of fear. But now what are people saying? Nowhere's safe anymore. That is exactly what this is all about. I've been saying that the plan is to create a eventually global military police force where the two are fused together under one command. As a result of this attack in Manchester, we have troops on the streets of Britain. More attacks, more troops. Oh, let's have tanks in the streets now. Blair's done that already. And the same in France. Troops on the streets are now becoming familiar because we must be protected from the terrorists. So then you ask the question again. Who's really behind the terrorists? When I talked about the plan for a world government and a world army, which is planned to be a global expansion of NATO, and the global cashless society and all of that. Well, when you start looking at where the world's going, that's exactly where it's going. And it's being justified to a very large extent by these terrorist attacks. So now, for instance, we've had Theresa May this week pressuring NATO. Oh, I bet they were resistant. Pressuring NATO to become involved in fighting terrorism. We already have NATO in Afghanistan, NATO bombing Libya, which I'll come to shortly. And a poll this week claims that of those interviewed, 7 out of 10 people in Britain would accept a world government to protect the world from war, from terrorism, and from the hoax, because that's what it is, of human-caused climate change. And so when we ask the question, and we should after all of these events, who benefits? Who benefits from this horror happening? Is it the people of Britain? No. Or any other country where there's an attack? No, of course not. Is it anybody apart from those that then have the excuse to change the world and change society according to what's been the plan all along? So, to those who've not read my books and not seen me speak, I'll say this. You may have a perception, thanks to the mainstream media, that I'm some kind of crazy, some kind of nutter. But the truth is, as events are showing, I'm not a nutter. I'm frickin' right. In the sense that what I've said was the plan and how that plan would be imposed through the perception deception is actually happening. Look at it. And we've had this week MI5 saying how they were shocked by this savagery of this attack. MI5? MI6? Shocked by savagery? It's the way they operate. The death and destruction that their manipulation, along with the CIA, etc., has been responsible for around the world. And now the crocodile brings forth the tears. Same with Trump. Do you know, there are so many ironies in the last few days, but this has got to be one of the biggest. Donald Trump talked about beautiful young children being killed in Manchester. Immediately after securing a deal with Saudi Arabia, the great terrorist funder of planet Earth, in league with the United States and Britain. A deal that will hand over to Saudi Arabia $350 billion worth of arms on top of what they've already given them. A Saudi Arabia that has been responsible, along with Britain and the United States, with the very creation of this ISIS idiocy, because that's what it is, horrific idiocy, which is being connected to this attack in Manchester and has been connected to attacks galore across Europe. The President of the United States stands there talking about the horrors of Manchester while selling weapons worth hundreds of billions to the very sponsor of the terrorism that he's condemning. The very country that has killed thousands of civilians and children in Yemen with American and British weapons. What about the beautiful young children in Yemen and in Syria and Iraq and Libya that have all died at the hands of this moral West? Talks about its values. And even the very foundation of the version of Islam on which this ISIS is based comes lock, stock and barrel from Saudi Arabia. When people talk about radical Islam, what they're talking about is a perverted version of that faith called Wahhabism, which was created by a man called Muhammad al-Wahhab in the 18th century in league with Mohammed bin Saud, the founder of the Saudi dynasty. Yes, Wahhabism, the version of the faith on which ISIS is based, is 100% the creation of Saudi Arabia. That's just been given £350 billion worth of arms. If you look at the two, ISIS and Saudi Arabia, there's only one in the list that is different. ISIS is called a US enemy. Saudi Arabia is called a US ally, and a British ally, of course. Everything else on the list is identical between Saudi Arabia and ISIS. Authoritarian, fundamentalist, oppresses women and minorities, destroys human rights, uses corporal punishment, regularly tortures people, regularly beheads people. This is the home of terrorism, in league with the money, the weapons, and the manipulation of countries like the United States and the United Kingdom. The countries with their presidents and their prime ministers like Theresa May, who stand up after these horrors and pontificate about our values and how our way of life must not be destroyed. Get them troops on the streets quick. Yes, Theresa May, Libya. I've exposed in great detail in the books and in this world tour and before how the list of countries that are being targeted in the Middle East, Iraq, Libya, Syria, are all on a list. Iran was on the list as well. That's why they're turning everything on Iran now. North Korea was on the list as well. That's why they're turning on everything on North Korea. It was a list created in the year 2000, or at least then, obviously goes back further, of countries for regime change. And under different presidents and different prime ministers, that list is being ticked off. And one of them, of course, was Libya. And the man who is being blamed for this bombing in Manchester comes from a family, Libyan family, who fought against Gaddafi Colonel Gaddafi. And I've explained many times before that what they did in Libya, what they did in Syria too, but what they did in Libya is they armed, funded and trained rebels, mercenaries, people that didn't like Gaddafi, to get rid of him, to start attacking government targets in Libya. And that was fine, no one said a word. And then when Gaddafi responded to those attacks, it was he's killing his own people. So we got to send NATO in and bomb the innocent to protect them from terrorism, to protect them from Gaddafi. During this period where the British and the Americans were orchestrating these rebels to attack Gaddafi, because he was on the list for regime change going way back, these people were allowed to move between Britain and Libya at will, because they were doing the West's bidding. Oh, get them on the plane. Which included the family, the father of this guy who's named as the bomber in Manchester. Do you know who was Home Secretary in Britain during that period, where these people were being allowed to move between Britain and Libya at will? Oh yeah, let them go. Theresa May. The Prime Minister today, who says we must protect our values, and put troops on the streets. And I'll give you another example of how this works. This is a former French minister for foreign affairs called Roland Dumas, speaking on French television, and he's talking about Syria, which the way they did Syria was a mirror of the way they did Libya. He said, I'm going to tell you something. I was in England 2 years before the violence in Syria on other business. I met with top British officials who confessed to me that they were preparing something in Syria. This was in Britain, not in America. Britain was organising an invasion of rebels into Syria. They even asked me, although I was no longer Minister for Foreign Affairs, if I would like to participate. Naturally, I refused. This operation, he says, goes way back. It was prepared, preconceived and planned. And so was the one in Libya, which involved the family of this bomber. This is what's going on. And where now are Boy George Bush, Barack Obama, Tony Blair, David Cameron, who were all leaders in Britain and America as these countries were picked off and this mass slaughter of the innocent unfolded? Where are they now? They're making speeches, being paid a fortune for them. They're standing up and saying, we must protect our values. We have got to wake up, human race. We have got to wake up to what's going on around us, because it ain't what we're told is going on around us. See, problem, reaction, solution is being played on us all the time. And in terms of these terrorist attacks, two things happen in relation to official involvement in them. One is those where the security networks actually do them. And this is possible where you have a gunman with a mask on, camouflage from head to toe, commits his horror. And then after that, they can name anybody. No one's seen him. But there's another way too. And that is you let things happen. You encourage things to happen. You stand by and watch them happen when you could stop them. Again and again and again, including what has happened in Manchester. In America, throughout Europe, you hear after these events, oh, the terrorist was known to the security services. Yes, I bet they bloody were. This is why assets of the FBI, even the mainstream media in some places in America, has had to acknowledge this. There's so many times these terrorist events and school shootings and what have you in America are carried out by assets or informers or people close to the FBI. This is what's happening. But don't get the media. Or don't wait for the media to tell you, because they won't. There was an extraordinary situation this week with a guy called Icke Campbell, who is, terrifying to say so, but I must because it's true, who is a BBC radio news presenter. And he was in Manchester talking to somebody, and he told the story of two Muslim men who came up to him after the bombing and said the government did it. And he was incredulous that anyone could not have trust in government so much as to even think that. And he said, I kid you not, he said, what has happened to critical thinking? Why didn't these two men have the ability, basically, for critical thought? They said the government did it. The government is a very big word and a very vast spectrum of agencies. Doesn't mean Theresa May did it, but that it was done by those deep in the shadows, or allowed to happen by those deep in the shadows, so that the problem can be offered a solution that takes us further down this road to Orwellian global dictatorship. Unfortunately, so-called journalists like Icke Campbell had their ability to critically think removed at birth. And they're like a firewalled computer. They simply cannot compute that agencies that condemn terrorism could be the agencies that are behind it to provide the excuse to change society as a result of the terrorism. And then we had also this week Shami Chakrabarti. I say, equally terrifyingly, that she was once head of an organisation called Liberty, which claims to campaign to protect freedom. She's now a baroness, anti-establishmency, and the opposition Attorney General for the Labour Party. And she was saying that we must not have conspiracy theories about the Manchester bombing. We must all just come together in unity. In other words, shut up and just accept the official story. This is why the genuine, and there's a lot of it that's not, alternative media is necessary to ask the questions and make the points that these people will never do. And one of the targets, using the excuse of Manchester and other bombings, is going to be to censor the alternative media and the alternative view, the alternative questioning, using laws to stop the terrorists. These are dangerous times, and we need to start to critically think and think things and possibilities that people have never thought before, because I can tell you now, after nearly 30 years of researching this in, goodness knows, 50, 60 countries, this world is not just a little bit not like it seems to be. It is nothing like it seems to be. And RT, or Russia Today, which actually does ask some more questions, doesn't go even nearly far enough, but it asks some more questions than the mainstream media does. It has a motto, if you like. Something appears on the screen now and again, which says, question more. No, we mustn't question more. We must question everything.